The weather outside is but the sound inside is so warm, it's so cozy and so delightful. And since we have no place to go, let the sound flow, glow, melt the snow, wrap us slow. You know what? All of that with today's video review. Welcome back everyone, I'm Sando and today's video review is all about the tube glow and warmth, and all of that isn't coming from a tropical country but from this guy, to be more precise, the Feliks Audio Eco Vibe, an OTL headphone amplifier that sells for 999 euros locally or $10.95 US across the pond. Feliks Audio made me quite a surprise, engraving the Soundnews logo on its sides, and I want to thank them for that. However, do note that all thoughts and opinions are always my own, and I'll mention all of the pros and all of the cons with this one, so let's get this party started. I also received my Feliks Envy Susvara edition just a couple of days ago. I've sent it for an upgrade around 2 months ago, but you'll need to wait for a couple of weeks because it has little to no burn-in and I need to put at least 100 hours until I can draw some conclusions. What I like about this small Eco Vibe is that it looks like a miniature version of the Feliks Envy amplifier. I owned plenty of OTL headphone amplifiers by now, from Woo Audio, from Little Dot, from XDO, and while all of them perform quite outstanding with high impedance dynamic headphones, I never quite like their Spartan look. This one is much more refined looking, and I really like the attention to the smallest details that the Feliks brothers put into this Eco Vibe. The logo, the model's name, laser imprinted, the wooden panels and the serial number underneath it, everything shows that these guys care a lot, not only for the sound, but for the looks as well. Compared to the regular Eco Classic, we now have 2 extra pairs of RCA inputs, totaling 3 pairs of RCA inputs, and of course we have a pair of RCA outputs since it can also function as a preamplifier in a stereo setup. We have a single 1/4-inch headphone jack on its front panel, an input selector on the right, and a beautiful metallic volume knob in the middle that has just the right mechanical resistance to not accidentally blow your eardrums. As for tech inside it, I'll remind you that this is an output transformer-less headphone amplifier or OTL amplifier, and compared to transformer-coupled headphone amplifier that use output transformers to match the high voltage and low current of vacuum tubes with the impedance of the headphones attached, OTL amplifiers like the Eco Vibe skips the transformers and connects the tubes directly to the headphones. Since the tubes operate at hundreds of voltage but deliver just a tiny amount of current, these OTL amplifiers are working best with high impedance dynamic headphones that demand lots of voltage but not as much current. Planar headphones usually demand lots of current and not as much voltage to fully energize their drivers, and that's the only reason why they work so well with transformer-coupled headphone amplifiers and not so much with OTL amplifiers. The Eco Vibe outputs up to 300 milliwatts of power per channel, surprisingly more power compared to the Elise and also Euphoria Evo, which are more expensive. Feliks Audio also recommends using dynamic headphones with an impedance of 80 ohms or higher, so all of those 300 ohms Sennheisers 250 to 600 ohm wire dynamics should work just fine, and every other dynamic headphone as well. You should also know that the output impedance is slightly higher compared to a transformer-coupled headphone amplifier, meaning that it will infuse a higher dose of energy into the bass region The lower the impedance of your headphones, the higher doses of bass energy it will inject. The higher the impedance is, the more linear the frequency response will be. We have a gain of 20 dB, and that is always the case regardless if you're using it as a headphone amplifier or as a preamplifier. The last thing that you need to know is that it uses two 6N 6P power tubes, the longer ones, and two 6N 1P driver tubes, the shorter ones. These are very affordable and you can stockpile lots of them for peanuts money, so don't worry about overspending because that is not really the case with the EcoVibe. Let's start with the things that I didn't like and then let's move on to the things that impressed me on the EcoVibe. First of all, I want to say that if you understand the limitations of OTL amplifiers, then some of these limitations can transform into blessings with a few dynamic headphones, and let me explain what I mean by that. First of all, if you are rocking planar headphones, then I would advise against using OTL headphone amplifiers. You can use a few that don't demand as much power, like Sundara, maybe Meze Elite, but generally speaking, they do not work that well, especially if you like to go a little higher on that volume knob, and two, if you like to listen to some loud electronica or wild rock tunes. Loud and wild rock and electronica do not mix together on planar headphones with OTL amplifiers. I tried some easier to drive planar headphones, but once I reached 90 dB, the bass was no longer super tight, it was losing its control and it started slowly distorting. That is precisely why, again, planar headphones don't mix that well with OTL amplifiers. You should use them with transistor-based solid-state amplifiers or maybe with transformer-coupled tube amplifiers. Problem number two is that the power is not rectified and cleaned up like is the case with transformer-coupled headphone amplifiers like the Envy, meaning that you should forget about using ultra-sensitive IMs with an amplifier like this. We have a 20 dB gain and you cannot lower that gain because we do not have a gain switch, and that adds a little bit of noise and distortion into the circuit, but this is a different kind of distortion, different kind of noise. It didn't bother me as much as compared to, say, a solid-state headphone amplifier, but nonetheless there was a little bit of noise and distortion with the volume all the way down with the music on pause. However, to be 100% frank with you, I'm not using desktop headphone amplifiers with ultra-sensitive IMs, and you should do the same. Now let's talk about the good parts because I have a lot to share with you guys. First of all, when I'm thinking about OTL amplifiers, in the back of my mind, I'm not thinking about amplifiers that deliver an amazing transparency, detailed retrieval, or just cleanness. And that was definitely the case with all of those entry-level Little Dots, XDO, or Wu Audio amplifiers. They were easily driving something like HD650 or HD800 by Sennheiser, but I couldn't really focus on all of those small intricacies playing in the background. I'll say with confidence that the EcoVibe sounds nothing like that, and once I start spinning Super Audio CDs on a high-end DAC, then I could easily focus on all of those small intricacies. Naturally, it's nowhere near the Feliks Performance Edition or, God forbid, Envy Susvara Edition, but it's almost on the same level with the Cain Sol 170 HA, and that should tell you a lot how I feel about its resolving abilities. For example, the HD800S on super affordable OTL amplifiers is dropping the resolution considerably, and it's shrinking the gap between HD650 and HD800, but on the EcoVibe there is a substantial difference sound-wise between HD650 and HD800, not only in terms of scale and frequency response, but also resolution and inner detail. The second thing that impressed me was its tonality, and instead of going to the bright side like those entry-level Little Dots did for me, or to the creamy, warm, sweet side like those entry-level Wu Audio amplifiers did, I believe that the EcoVibe is somewhere in the middle. Of course, there is some of that warmth and tube glow as well, but not as much like I'm getting on Wu amplifiers. So I believe it's much more honest and closer to linearity. It's reminding me a lot about the Feliks Envy, and not so much about many other tube amplifiers that I tried in the past. And while the bass and the treble region try to remain as honest and as linear as possible, the one region that will conquer your heart is definitely the mid-range region, adding a lifelike vibe to the whole affair. I won't call it super warm or overly sweet. There is some of that, of course, but not a lot to tilt its tonality to the bright or to the dark side, although there is definitely a little bit of darkness in there that people tend to like nowadays quite a lot. Dynamics honestly were simply outstanding with something like HD800S. I was simply stunned. I was listening more than 2 hours, and I remember never moving and constantly changing the tunes because it simply sounded outstanding with HD800S, even on aggressive music such as rock, metal or electronica. Absolutely fabulous. What I like is that it was adding so much energy and physicality into the bass region. There is so much bloom into the mid-range, and it was gently slashing the upper treble, somehow transforming the HD800S into an obedient and pleasant sounding pair of headphones. And while you get tons of resolution, lots of tightness and grip with fully discrete solid-state headphone amplifiers, there is no way you can get the same flow, the same tonality, the same natural sound as I'm getting right now with HD800S. And if you believe that your dynamic headphones need a helping hand with that bass, with the mid-range region, then the Echo Vibe becomes a very enticing proposition, especially considering its technicalities and cool look. The fourth part that I liked is that I never reached that 1 o'clock volume position with the HD800S on my head. My casual volume sits at around 10, maybe 11 volume position, and super loud starts from 12 volume position. So there is a ton of power and a ton of headroom still remaining on top with something like this, which are not easy to drive. But mind you, I was using a slightly hotter outputting DAC, outputting 3.5 volts via RCA as opposed to an industry standard 2-volt output DAC that was adding a little bit of gain and making the Echo Vibe a little louder. But regardless, if I was using an industry standard 2-volt DAC, it was still driving basically everything, and it feels like an infinity gauntlet driving the HD800S, HD650, Biodynamic T1. So please don't worry about driving some difficult loads, as that won't be the case with this little guy. And the last part that is no secret to anyone, the soundstage this amplifier produces is simply outperforming most, if not all, solid-state headphone amplifiers, and it's on par with a few transformer-coupled headphone amplifiers. So it always sounds airy, big, extended. There is plenty of stereo separation, a really nice depth, especially with open back headphones. So just expect an impressive layering, a good stereo separation, and an out-of-head experience that stretches wide and goes past your shoulder level. This is one of the strongest attributes of the Echo Vibe, and I would not be surprised if you are buying the Echo Vibe specifically for this, for the 3D effects, for the stage, for the depth, because this is where it simply shines, and it's very comfortable to be here. In the end, regardless if I was listening to angry rock or calm and soothing blues, lots of air was traveling all around me, somehow relaxing my brain and inducing a calming effect. In a nutshell, the Echo Vibe is so far the cleanest and most truest to live sounding OTL amplifier that I have tried so far, and that was reflected in its price point. Although 999 euros or 1095 US dollars seems like a lot of pennies, this is considered affordable in the world of high-end audio, and if you are looking at Feliks audio portfolio, then this is the second most affordable headphone amplifier they provide. However, please don't mistake its status among Feliks audio ranks. Its petite looks or small footprint with flawed sonics, mediocre resolution or weak dynamics, as that wasn't really the case. If you need an organic sound that lets you enjoy music for years and years, then I would recommend using an R2 ladder DAC, something like FireK13, Hyphaman Serenade Junior, Topping Centauros or Holo Audio Cyan 2. I'm highly recommending this amplifier to be used with high impedance dynamic headphones, otherwise stick to transformer coupled or solid state head amplifiers with your planar headphones. Thanks as always for watching, everyone. Please smash that like button and consider subscribing if you found this video helpful. Keep rocking, and I'll see you very soon.